In a multicultural and pluralistic society, what does tolerance mean? Is it accepting other people for who they are? Giving them the same rights we have to their own beliefs and lifestyles? Tolerance means you're free to adhere to your own convictions while accepting others may have theirs. Harmony and difference. Next on Living Smart. Welcome to Living Smart, the show designed to help you get the most out of life. A lifetime scholar, author, and student of religion and philosophy, Dr. Jill Carroll teaches, writes, and speaks on the subject. She's an adjunct associate professor of religious studies at Rice University. She also directed the Boniok Center for Religious Tolerance there until June 2009. After co-hosting the Peaceful Coexistence radio program, Dr. Carroll founded the Amazing Faith Project, a national grassroots community initiative that fosters interpersonal relationships between people of all faiths and no faith through dialogue. In her most recent book, Dialogue for Civilizations, Golan's Islamic Ideals and Humanistic Discourse, features a Sufi leader who promotes peaceful coexistence of people from different backgrounds. She's with us today to make a case for tolerance and why it matters. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr.
Thanks for having me.
And sometimes I like to start the show with, in this case, with the definition of tolerance, because some people don't like even the definition. Tolerance is a fair, objective, and permissive attitude towards those whose beliefs and personal characteristics, race, religion, nationality, are different from one's own. So, does tolerance mean that all behaviors have to be accepted?
I think it does not. And I think most of us who practice it, and I think many people do practice tolerance in some form or another, even if they don't consciously admit that. It doesn't mean we tolerate everything and that everything is okay. That's called anarchy. That's a different show.
Let's do one on anarchy.
Let's do another one on anarchy. But what I like about that definition that you just read is the word difference.
Okay.
And this is what tolerance is about. Tolerance is about how we deal with difference, whether it's different skin color, different background, different language, different ethnicity, or different religion. And it's really an internal capacity. What is our capacity? How do we feel when we're around people who are different from us?
Right.
And this is something that I think as human beings we have to face. Not all of us are the same. We may have a universal human condition, but as individual human beings, we are different from each other. And at some point, we have to face that.
And what I don't understand, people do feel threatened sometimes by accepting someone else's truth. That doesn't mean you're losing your own truth or your own belief system.
Right. Well, and sometimes, to be fair to people who are a little bit nervous about this notion of tolerance, they've been sort of beaten over the head with the tolerance stick,
right.
Because they've been told that in order to be tolerant, you have to accept someone else's belief, when in fact you don't. It's not about accepting other beliefs or even respecting other beliefs. It's respecting other people and their right to have their beliefs, whatever they are.
Their right to say whatever they want to say.
Yeah. You can think the beliefs are wacky,
right.
But if you respect the other person and their right to have theirs just as much as we have ours, our rights to have ours, that's tolerance.
Exactly. Now, I like this quote. Tolerance is the positive and cordial effort to understand another's beliefs, practices, and habits without necessarily sharing or accepting them, which is what you just said.
Right.
Sounds like civility to me.
It is very civil. And I think we may get to this later in the conversation, but I think this is why tolerance is, for many democracies, it's one of the chief civic virtues. Civic. Because it's something that in civil society, in civic community, we have to have. If you're going to have a democracy, if you're going to have a free society where all kinds of people from all kinds of places live together, it won't work without basic ground level tolerance, translated as civility.
Are we in America more or less tolerant than we were 100 years ago, let's say?
I think it depends on how you look at that. I mean, in a sense, we're being pushed to be more tolerant now, simply because our demographics are very different than they were 100 years ago.
And they will continue to be different.
And they'll continue to be very different. We were a much more homogenous kind of country 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, than we are now. And so this pushes us. It pushes us to expand ourselves, to expand our capacity to live and work and play and go to school next to people who are very different from us. Whereas Americans living here 100 years ago didn't have to do that in the exact same way.
Right.
But having said that, even if we look the same and even have the same religion and speak the same language, we still end up with people in our very families who are really, really different from us. And we think, how are you in my same family?
Right.
And we have to practice tolerance
Right.
with them because they're their own person and they get to be. And so, it's a challenge for everyone, no
Right.
matter where you are and no matter where we are in the history of our own country. Demographically, it's a big challenge now.
Now, if you consider that tolerance is a virtue, that you will function better in society being more tolerant, then what kind of tips would you give parents to teach their children tolerance?
Well, I think parents have to model it, for one. They have to model it in their home life and in their family life and with the neighbors and the people at school and everyone. It's interesting, though. Kids don't have a problem with tolerance.
Why is that?
Because they haven't been taught to hate everybody yet.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
young yet, and they
And
don't
plus
have...
their friends are from other
Yes.
races and religions. And
Exactly. They're at the younger end of this demographic shift. They're already at school with all kinds of people from all kinds of places, and it's just not an issue for them. They don't realize it is an issue until their parents tell them it is.
Right.
Or until the adults tell them that it is. It's like, oh, I didn't know it was an issue. He's just my friend, and he has a cool Wii, and I like to play with it. They don't even think
I like to
about
play
it.
video games.
Exactly,
Yeah.
they don't even think about it.
Right.
So, I think something like intolerance is definitely learned in many respects.
Can you be a child that was raised tolerant and all of a sudden change as you get older? I mean, do you notice that?
Of course. I think sometimes, human beings go through many different changes and paths in your life, and sometimes, different life circumstances can push you to be gripped by something in a way that may have you be a little bit rigid or sort of narrow or very zealous about a certain perspective or view or belief system. And so during those moments of our years of that kind of zealousness, you might not be as open or as tolerant of other beliefs.
But is there a case for tolerance? I mean, what's the advantage of being more tolerant? What if I just don't want to be tolerant and I want to believe my own stuff and I don't believe that anybody else should have a different mindset or view?
Well, I mean, that's a nice theory, but the fact is you can't control anybody else's view unless you
Exactly.
want to shoot them. And that normally doesn't
That is
work.
not a solution,
That
right.
doesn't work. So if we're going to have a free society, and if we say we believe in freedom, which we say we do in this country, we say we believe in freedom more than any other place on the planet. And so given that sort of constitutional, high-level commitment to freedom, by definition, we will live, work, and play with people who are vastly different from us, because in their freedom, they get to be. We don't have to like it, but they get to be. And so in order for that kind of society to work, it has to have the grease of tolerance.
Okay.
It just makes society work better.
I like the grease of tolerance.
Yeah.
Catholic philosopher Jacques Maritain stated there is a genuine tolerance when a person is convinced of a truth, but at the same time recognizes the right of others who deny this truth to speak their own mind. In order for tolerance to avoid being a vice, this is why I found this interesting, it must be founded on a positive regard for truth and an abiding love for others. I know this is long, but the positive regard for truth, whose truth is it?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily anyone's particular truth, but I think he's using it in that sort of cosmic way. The search for truth. All human beings, we try to find out the truth about things, about life, about the world, about God, about whatever it is. And each of us as individuals, come to our own truths about it. And we can hold those truths really tightly and really powerfully. And they form the corner post of our lives. And when we feel them a little bit threatened, then the house of our life starts rocking. And that's why we want to hold on to them. I think what's interesting in that quote is his term apathy. Not the apathy, the vice.
Right.
Because what I think he means here is that sometimes tolerance can be a kind of apathy that says, we don't know what's true. We can't know the truth. Your truth,
The
my
relative
truth.
stuff,
It's
right?
totally
Everything is relative.
La la la.
You don't take a stand.
Let's just go have a drink. Which having a drink is fine, but
But you have to take a stand, is what you're saying, and that's
Exactly.
okay. And the more,
exactly.
yeah, right.
And I think that's what his quote is really about. True tolerance is when you believe what you believe, and you've founded your life on it, and you've let those truths make a claim on your life.
Right.
And you're being a responsible human being, trying to live according to what's real and what's true as the best you can understand it. And you get that not everybody's going to see it the same way as you, and that's okay.
Do most people you find as a professor know that Thomas Jefferson had theories of tolerance in our Constitution?
I don't think they know that, no.
Tell me what you know about that.
Well, I mean, tolerance is a term that was bandied around a lot in the 16th and 17th centuries, coming from Europe, because they're coming out of 3 centuries of religious wars, where there was
persecution.
And there was religious intolerance. And a lot of the folks that first came over here volunteered to be those colonists because they were tired of those wars and they wanted to come over here so they could have more freedom, particularly of religion.
Exactly, religious freedom.
Yeah, and so the concept of tolerance, as Jefferson speaks about it, he gets from John Locke, the 17th century philosopher. They very much couch it as a civic virtue, that society literally is blood in the streets without tolerance. And they have the data, they have the body count to back it up. They got 3 centuries of intolerance when the institutions of state and the institutions of religion were completely fused. And so this is their argument. We have to have a society where tolerance as a value is central. And it has to do with how we define our freedoms, how we set up our institutions of the state, of civil society, of religion, all of it. So tolerance is very much in the mix. And it's not a small thing.
Right,
it's a serious issue.
Yet we're very polarized right now in this country.
Yeah, I think we always have been in many ways. I think polarization in many senses is it's kind of the dark side of being a free people. When you're free and you're free and you're going to say stuff and you're going to think what you want and you're going to live your life how you want and it's just part of what comes with freedom. It can have a dark side. It can be so much so that it begins to sort of eat itself. And I think you can look through American history and see where we've gone to the edge of that several times and come back, and we may be in one of those phases now.
So would you say the definition of tolerance has changed in America over the years?
I think what it means to practice it changes because our situation changes, our demographics change, the things that we're contending with change. So the details of it change over time because the situation changes. But the basic capacity, I think, is the same. It's how well can you be with difference? Are we strong enough in ourselves to be okay and to feel empowered to live and do and be in the world, even though not everyone is like us?
How can you have experience with the Faith Project and seeing people who disagree politically, religiously, and who maybe don't have any desire maybe to really understand the other side. They hate each other. And how do you convince them this is a virtue? This is something good for them?
Well, you can't really convince people. You can't make people do anything, really.
Okay.
I think if we got that, we'd have a more peaceful world. That we can't force people to do anything. But typically, this conversation lands in people's laps when it becomes an issue for them and their family.
Interesting.
And so many people will say that intermarriage in their family was when suddenly tolerance came and sat down at the kitchen table.
Interesting.
When, they were raised, their families, whatever they are, some sort of Christian or Catholic or Protestant or whatever, and then one of their nieces or son or daughter marries a Muslim.
Wow.
Or marries a Jew or converts to Judaism. And it's suddenly, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So the choice becomes, are we going to still stay strident about, I don't care about those people, they're stupid, they're wrong, they're idiots, blah, 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 and lose our daughter?
Right.
So it's usually when it comes and when you really feel the impact in your own life, that's when we all get prompted to change how we're thinking. Right. And until you feel that impact, you won't change.
Well, what is it about that closeness? I guess you're talking family. What is it that changes things? Is it because you finally realize, oh my gosh, all these stereotypes I've had and I've been able to have, I can no longer have because they're sitting right there on the table?
Exactly. You're confronted with the reality of the situation. More specifically, you're confronted with a human being.
Right.
A human being sitting there looking right at you, and they have their family and their cares and concerns in the world, just as we have ours. And we're confronted with their humanity. So we can't just write them off as easily as we could maybe before.
Exactly. Why is it that, some people just say diversity is so great and it's wonderful and we have to be diverse, but what are the arguments in favor of diversity?
Well, there are things that come with diversity. There's a kind of richness. There's a richness of perspective and solutions. There are different kinds of ways of thinking about things. And so when you have challenges or problems that need to be solved, it's helpful to have multiple viewpoints. But the thing is, I don't think we really have to go too far down the road of is it a good or bad thing? It's just what is.
It is what it is.
It is a demographic reality. Diversity is not something we should or shouldn't have. We have it. Whether we like it or not, right. It's the demographic reality. And so the more important question is, how are we going to be about it? Are we going to resist it and hate it and feel threatened by it and be ugly about it? Or are we going to say, look, these are the facts on the ground, and so I need to get myself to a place where I can feel empowered, be who I am, contribute what I have to contribute, and be okay with it.
Right.
And so that's, to me, that's really the demographic reality. It's not about pushing an agenda, the diversity agenda. Nobody wants to have that pushed on them.
You notice that you don't hear that much anymore.
Yeah, because it's kind of a bad word. It's like people fell down the diversity tree and hit every branch. They had all this forced diversity training. It's just like, look, nobody wants to be forced to do any of that.
Right.
How can we make this work for everybody?
I'm just very curious, your Amazing Faith project, some of the anecdotes that you have from just sitting with people who are completely different from you.
People just, they're stunned by it. And the thing is that particular dinner dialogue, and it happens over dinner while people are sharing a meal together. And there are particular questions that we have, and you read the question aloud, you draw one off a deck, you read it, and you have to answer it on the spot. So
without thinking too much.
So everybody's kind of on the spot together. You're immediately all kind of vulnerable together.
Right.
And it's a controlled conversation. We have a moderator. And so it's a very carefully managed conversation to keep people in their hearts sharing from their own experience, not sharing their opinions, their judgments, their whatever. And so within just a few minutes, people go from 0 to 60 very quickly. They're just immediately sharing from their hearts. And what they come away with is, I had no idea that Jews, for example, or Muslims, or Catholics, or Buddhists, I just had never met people like this, and I had no idea, and I'm so touched by what they said, and we have such similar concerns. We have different ways of thinking about them, but such similar concerns, and such deep human concerns. And so that's been the net result, is that people come out of it with just a profound sense of the human family.
Right.
And that we don't have to all think the same, because we're not going to.
Right.
But there can be a deeper connection, a human connection at the level of relationship. That's not about whether you agree or disagree.
Now, you told me you enjoyed very much writing the book on the Gulen movement, and that you've been to Turkey many times. Tell me a little bit more about what you learned from this movement about religious tolerance.
The Gulen movement, for people who don't know, because it's not a very well-known movement, it's a transnational civil society movement of people, 3 generations now, of people inspired by the ideas of this Turkish imam named Fethullah Gulen. He lives here in the United States now in a retreat center in Pennsylvania. He came here for health reasons. And these folks are active in 120 countries. They've founded 1,000 or more schools, many thousands more types of sort of interfaith, intercultural types of civil society, charitable type organizations in many, many cities across the world. And they root themselves in notions of dialogue and tolerance and peaceful coexistence. They are mostly Muslims, and so they find these themes in their faith, and they believe that this is the best way to live them out. Just the same way that many Christians find those themes in their faith, and they live them out, or Jews, or most people from most faiths. So I didn't really know that much about this movement until I interacted with them here in Houston, and then began to travel with them and wrote a book about their guy, and then the book's has done well. So I've been able to see the movement active in, I think, 11 or 12 countries now.
Okay.
It's astonishing. They're very, very successful, very progressive, very forward-looking. And when I say that, I mean they're very much looking forward into the 21st century, creating a 21st century that works for everyone. Not trying to recover some kind of golden era of the past or something like that. They're just, let's go forward. Let's create the world.
A different world.
A new world that works for everyone.
Right.
And they're very successful, and it's just been a blessing to be involved with them.
Because you're an expert in almost all religions, which one would you think is more tolerant than others? Is there such thing?
I don't think so. I mean, each religion has people within it that they think it's the most tolerant religion.
Right.
They
want to claim.
They all want to claim it. Others of them say tolerance is terrible and our religion is not tolerant.
Exactly.
And that's why it's better than everyone else's.
Exactly.
So I think what's true from a sort of factual perspective is that each of the world's religions, they have resources within them that support a notion of peaceful coexistence and tolerance. And they come in what we would call the companion virtues.
Right.
Compassion, dealing fairly and justly with people. All the world's religions can hold hands and sing on these kinds of values.
Kumbaya.
Yeah. They come at it from a different place.
Right,
they have
right.
different language. But this is kind of a core ethos. Do they always live up to it? No. No, they don't. Do we as human beings always live up to our values?
No, of course not.
Of course we don't.
Of course not.
The religions are made up of human beings and we're all flawed. So, but they all have those resources.
Yeah. I'd like to share some of the questions you get on your blog, which I find very interesting because it kind of deals with people who... Anyway, let me just read this. Should I turn my back when somebody else gets... He says, you get a lot of strong responses to tolerance. One question asked was, should I turn my back when somebody else gets a benefit, job, reward, raise, or promotion only because of affirmative action?
That's a question about affirmative action.
I'm sure you get this question all the time.
You know, I'm not an affirmative action expert, and it has to do with whatever your company's policy is on that issue, so I can't really speak to that. I think the deeper question here about tolerance is, are there times when we shouldn't be tolerant? I would say yes, of course. There are times when people's rights are being violated. We can't tolerate that. When people's life is endangered, we can't tolerate that. When their well-being and health is being threatened, when their property is being stolen, we can't. Those things are not to be tolerated.
Right.
And the notion of tolerance as a civic virtue is never ever meant to include those things.
Exactly.
It's never ever meant to be tolerant of violations of people's rights. That's the limit of tolerance. Just like that's the limit of freedom. I am not free to do something that harms your freedom. And so, no, it doesn't mean that at all.
Exactly.
It means you should question it.
Okay.
Get more clear on the policy.
Let me ask you why it's important for people to know the basics of religion, of the different religions of the world.
I think it's helpful, especially now, living in the United States, but also living in a global reality now. We're living in a global 21st century. We're global in ways we've never been in the history of the world. And here in the United States, we have all the major religions alive and well. We have all the minor ones, all the new ones. We even have some old ones that were dead. They've come back alive. You know, they've got a website out in Berkeley somewhere. And so, I mean, this is the United States of America.
That I have just a website.
I mean, it's amazing. You know, the religion of Thor. You know, the Norse. It's back. You know. And it's astonishing. It's part of what we have in our freedom
This
here.
is America.
It is America. It's quintessentially what we do. It's one of the greatest things about this country. And so just to be here, it's helpful to know a little bit, I mean, just, 5 basic facts about another religion that you're just not raised up with and you've never really been around, because chances are you're going to have a coworker or somebody at school or a neighbor or someone in your family eventually is going to come into contact with that, and it's just going to be helpful to know. Because the thing is, in the absence of actual knowledge or actual facts about things, we'll make stuff up. And we'll then forget that we made it up,
right,
and then treat those people as if those things that we made up were true.
Okay.
And that's when it becomes problematic.
What are the 3 most important things you'd like to leave people with about religious tolerance?
I would like for people to consider it, especially those who have a problem with it. Those who have a problem with it because they say it's all about relativism. It's not. It's not at all. It's about being who you are and knowing who you are and rooting who you are in a profound sense that everyone gets to do that and gets to be that. And so it's about overcoming ourselves and pushing ourselves to be bigger than we've ever been. I think that's the key issue. Tolerance demands that we be bigger than we've ever been, that we expand ourselves beyond our limits. It's a true self-overcoming. And that's what I would like for people to consider about tolerance.
It just stretches your mind, your
soul,
your
completely stretches
heart.
you. It's like yoga. If you're not feeling the stretch, you're not doing the work.
How do you know you're living smart?
I think I know that I'm living smart when I can walk into a room and I'm the only Anglo person, maybe I'm the only woman, maybe I'm the only person that comes from my background, and I'm not freaked out. I'm not scared. If I'm scared, if I'm nervous, if I feel a disempowering, then I know I'm not living big enough, and I'm not living smart. And so that's a big measure for me.
Did it take you a long time to get to that space?
It didn't take me a long time. What it takes is intentional practice. We can't hold ourselves away just in our own little world with people who look just like us and think just like us and live just like us. We have to engage the world. It's a big place, and we've got to engage it. And I think we're living smart when we do that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jill
Oh,
Carroll.
you're welcome.
You enlightened us. And to learn more about tolerance and why it matters, go to our website. There you'll find a complete resource list. You can also email us or call us with your comments at 713-743-8513. And that's our show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember to live smart. I'm Patricia Gras. Have a joyful week. You were great.
For a transcript of this program, send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.